In just a minute, show that myself, Cordova, and Mr. Molina are present. Please stand for pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, is a symbol of friendship among united cultures.
Let's bring us to action item. Well, he just had a phone call, so he just stepped out.
All right, I'll find out and I'll give you a call. Okay.
So it's right there.
My apologies.
Okay, good evening, members, Mr. President, members of the board. In front of you, you have several handouts that hopefully we can get to the meat of it relatively quickly, but I do want to recap. On the screen, you have the revenue source that we discussed from the state guarantee, education guarantee, which is 13,600,669, and then plus the extended learning time allocation of 590,607 for a total revenue source from SCG of 14,191,276. So that's the operational that we're going to work with tonight. You have already literally gone through all the what produces that revenue. So if you go to page 2, we've kind of gone through it and kind of, tried to simplify it, but yet provide you with enough information that gives you the opportunity to approve the budget. Where you see on the next page, which is the one with the red and the green, where you see the green, we're going to focus on the shaded area, which is the operational piece. Operational, at-risk, bilingual, elementary arts, gen ed, PE. Those total dollars in that shaded area is your 13,600,669.45. Just so that you're aware that that's what we're working with. On a different page, I'm going to go into in a little bit better how we break down the expenditures rather than having the expenditures spread out like the way we do here. Under the red is your salaries, under your operational gen ed, your operating costs and so on. So if we look at that, we have your just a recap on what we have on our sheet with all the revenue. The expenditures for salaries were on this. Okay, so when we look at the 15,075, that is salaries that are across all the programs, which would be CARES and so forth. Our focus tonight is to get an operational budget approved, which would be your operational expenditures. And I'm going to tell you how much that totals to, if you'll bear with me for a second. The shading areas in the pink, that would be your operational expenditures under your red column. Okay? So to continue on to the next page, this is the one that has proposed on it, the different proposal amounts. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go forward to that one. So when we go through the operational expenditures, you have this in your packet. We went through and we discussed with finance everything on the list as far as proposed FY22 that are non-compensatory expenditures. So scrolling down, and that would be on your page 2. It has your non-compensation costs, which are 2.127802. Okay. Then underneath there, tying to what we had on the miscellaneous costs on your red and green sheet, you have a total of substitutes, additional compensation, athletics, level ups for teachers that are going from one level to the other in licensure that have applied to and submitted their dossier. So additional compensation categories total up to $746,000. Then you have your extended earning time program, which is the $590,000 on your revenue source that's split out on the first sheet that I showed you. So that's your extended learning time that we don't budget within the budget. Okay, so then you have your operational salaries and benefits, and I'm gonna go over the cost sheet for that, the job cost sheet for that. That's a total of $10,726,866. So your total operational expenditures total up to $14,191,276. That includes your 2.1746, your 590, your 10,700,000 for a total of 14,191,000. That is your revenue source from your SCG. So you have before you a balanced budget.
I just did want to say we did go over this, all of these expenditures at the board meeting on Monday. We did review it with finance. None of the numbers correct changed from Monday to
now. The only thing that changed was the contractual services on this sheet here. For SPED went from, I think we had budgeted 240 preliminary, but the cost to date is 258,000. So we went ahead and increased it to 260,000 so that we make sure that we cover those contractual costs for ancillary services. So that would have been the only difference between Monday's presentation and this presentation. Now, what I wanted to do, if you don't have any questions, or if we can wait until we go over it just a little bit, because I know that your primary concern was where are the dollars for salaries. So if you look at the next two long sheets, the first one, and it's the exact same thing. If you look on the back, the grand total is the $50,075 that is on your red and green sheet. Okay, as far as salaries and benefits. But it's broken down in the first one is by school. So you have by location. So you have certain ones that are at 2 school sites covering different school sites. You also have diagnosticians and psychologists covering 6 school sites. You have your administration salaries totaled up and your categories below that. You have your Bayard Elementary, all your employees. So it would be your reading coaches, your coordinators, custodial food service assigned to that school, interventionists, library assistants, principals, secretaries, teachers of different levels. The early childhood is considered kindergarten. the teachers, grades 1 through 2. We have a mistake on Bayard Elementary because it incremented to grade levels 1 through 13, but that's 0.35 at Bayard, which should add up to the 539,000. So if you look at the allocations for the different school sites, the totals for each school site, you have Bayard Elementary at $2 million, Central at 1.8, Cobre High School at 2.8 million. Flip it over, you have food service, which generates their own funding, and it's probably separated only the people that are across the district and not within so that doesn't represent all of food service, just because it's listed separately there. The 4 daycare, Hurdy Elementary is at 1.4. Maintenance is at 329,000. San Lorenzo at $1,028,000, and Snell Middle School at 2.2. And the special ed that is across special ed areas and not necessarily allocated to one school site is what's listed under special ed. So you can tie your 15,075 on this sheet back to your red and white sheet under the red bar that shows salaries across program.
So, can you explain, so like yesterday or Monday when we got this sheet right here, right? Under spend costs, you explained the contractual services B260. What is that miscellaneous? That's 29,315. That's listed under operational spending.
So that was it was allocated to the operating costs under the gen ed, but we went ahead and allocated some of those costs as special ed program costs, so that way, if special ed requires additional supplies, additional hours for staffing or anything like that, that's in addition to salaries, we went ahead and moved it from the gen ed costs to the miscellaneous costs under the special ed program.
So you brought it from gen ed operational to. All right. I was just wondering.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't matching.
And then your final sheet is by we tried to do it by job class, but there's some that show like the 1411 will show like it's showing coordinators and guidance counselors, which don't necessarily they don't belong in that job class. So we basically it's still your 10 million 726, but it's a little bit easier to see what the positions are rather than the school side. So it's just a different way of presenting like where the monies are and the salaries. And then as you go down, you have your different fund codes. So anytime you see 11,000 in your fund code, that's operational. And then the grants have a 2 in front of them. So those are the different grant funding sources. So for instance, like when you look at the bottom of page 1 of this sheet, you have 25153. That's the Medicaid program, and the job class is 1215. That's considered registered nurses. So then you can see that your registered nurses, there's 3 nurses and they're allocated to the Medicaid program. Okay.
And real quick, Ms. Levine, I'm just asking a question. So I'm looking at the one for Monday, and so, I mean, it's a good thing, right? So, our expenditures went from, 10.075 to 10.10. So we have less expenditure. Good thing, right? I was just kind of wondering, so it looks like there was something that got cut from that one on Monday to make our expenditures less today.
In the operational side?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we were able to kind of look at the programs a little bit better,
Okay.
as far as what we could put in grants, what we could cover in grants rather than operational. So we did some shifting, yesterday, kind of with the finance team, and then, also, Monday, Tuesday, maybe with principals, they kind of were like, well, can we put some in here, or can we move somebody over here?
One
So
of
that's
the,
a good thing. Yeah, I was just wondering where the fact got kind of trend.
yeah, one of the biggest things that, came across in meeting with principals is we had 3 schools that had some bigger class sizes. So we really went back, we met with principals, looked at what the needs were, and we are going to be doing some revisions to the CARES grant in order to meet the needs of those 3 schools. So in 3 of the schools, which was San Lorenzo, Bayard, and Hurley, we are putting an extra teacher there for a class size reduction teacher. So in the CARES grant that we brought to the board a few weeks ago, we had a line item for an SEL teacher at the elementary. We're deleting that position. We actually had some funding for an additional nurse. In talking with the nurses, they don't feel that they need another nurse. What they really want is a clerk, because next year we're going to be able to be doing a lot more billing for Medicaid. And so they would rather have a clerk to help them with that paperwork for that. So we're going to bring the CARES grant back, where we took out those 2 line items. What we're going to add in instead of those 2 line items is we're going to add 3 teachers for class size reduction, and we're going to add the 1 clerk to help the nurses.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what you're seeing, some of that difference right there, is that shift that we made
Yeah.
to really help the schools with their needs.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, if it was increased, then I get
Yeah.
concerned,
Yeah.
but there's a decrease.
Regarding student-teacher ratios, I'm glad to see that direction going, especially in the elementary schools. However, one of the questions I had Monday, and I still have, how does performance assessment fall into this? Have we really quantified where we are in terms of needs by looking at previous test scores?
Well, we've been able to look at our benchmark data, because we technically have not had any state assessment scores since 2019. We have not done state assessment since then, so we've been using our benchmark data, which is our beginning of year, middle of year, end of year. At the high school, they use NWEA. Grades 3 through 8, they use the New Mexico MSFA, and K1 and 2 use the station. So that's the data that we've been using to, and then I-ready for that. To look at our data. So we are using our data to help determine what some of our needs are, and what some of the schools did is really, I think it was San Lorenzo and Bayard, looking at putting that extra teacher in the lower grades so that we can lower those teacher pupil ratios. The pandemic still has an effect on some of the learning gaps that we have, so really trying to look at closing some of those. And then we will, we're going to be looking at our professional development schedule so that we can really determine, we're actually looking at putting out a survey to our teachers with some of the different ideas that we have, and that the state is going to be providing in reference to professional development. This year, we really focused heavily on math, so we did a lot of professional development. We purchased the new curriculum for the elementary, and we also have a new curriculum for the secondary school. So with the secondary, we had training, but we also had the coaches come in and do some in-classroom supports for the teachers by observing and then modeling lessons for them in the classroom. With the elementary, we spent time learning the different components of the program, looking at the computerized program that's available. Next year, we're gonna delve a little bit more into how to use the data to help the teachers create some maybe more small group and independent lessons for the students that are struggling. So those are some of the things that we're looking at extending next year. We know that we also have to really focus on MLSS, which is the student support system that was that before. And so we really want to look at some professional development in that area because that'll really help the teachers to structure looking at the individual needs of the different students that they have in their classrooms. So we have some ideas to help address some of those gaps. But again, we want to put out a survey to the teachers to get some feedback from them so that we can then build our professional development plan, which will all support this.
Thank you for providing that. Can you tell me pretty much what the student-teacher ratios are then for the elementary grades?
I don't have it written down. I know that we have some of our numbers on the charts. I think that yesterday, before the revisions on Monday, we were looking at one class with 30. That class has now been divided in half. So I think that some of our biggest classes are probably ranging around 20 to 22 maybe. So some of our class sizes are anywhere from 15 to probably 22. But we can go back and look at that for sure, and get those numbers for the next quarter.
You're talking about an average, or you talking?
That's an, well, the
So I think
class
that-
sizes are running right now for next year, based on what
Oh,
we've done.
next year.
Yeah, for next year. Anywhere from, we will have one class with about 8 or 9 kids in it. And then that's probably the smallest. The average is probably running 15, 16. We may have a couple of classes with 22, 23. I don't remember us seeing any that had bigger than that. At 25 at Central in one class. The one in the upper grade, right? That's not the one that they split into. I think it's there too. Right.
And the reason I asked that is that the board does have a policy on student-teacher ratios, and I think the number was 22. I don't remember, but it's something that would help us in terms of going forward with the policy revisions.
Yeah.
To take a good look at that.
Because we also have to follow the state. The state has statutes. So for kindergarten is 14, first grade is 20, second and third grade is an average of 22, fourth and fifth is an average of 20, 24.
And those are maximums. We could actually set
Those
them.
are averages, so
okay.
so there are averages across the district.
Yeah.
Kindergarten is set, it's 14. Now, if we go above that, we could ask for a waiver, we could have put an 8 in the classroom.
Yeah, but my direction would be to take a look at performance and see what would be more effective. And so long as we don't exceed the state and not have to ask for action, we can go below that and take a look at that, especially after COVID.
Right, and that's why we feel it's really important to shift the CARES money and really put the money in those 3 schools that need that additional teaching and that teaching evaluation.
And so I have questions around a couple of things, and I know that they're probably not in granite, and that would be like the superintendent position at 200,000.
That includes benefits, remember that. So
So
we
what was that?
we did budget a little bit higher because we don't know what you all are going to offer the superintendent. So what we budgeted is a little bit higher than what Mr. Mendoza was making and higher than what I'm making. So we did budget that. That doesn't mean that that's what we're obligated to. But remember that this does include benefits. So benefits are a big chunk of that too. So
That usually runs around 30%, correct?
that's up to 40. That's up to 40%.
And the data used for that, was that done with any comparison with districts that are similar to our size? Which we'll
We
get
use
to.
the information that Mr. Batch sent you all. And we did go a little bit higher, like he emailed that to y'all, he doesn't say. And it has the averages from surrounding districts. So we use that information, we went just a little bit higher, because again, we don't know where you all are gonna go with that. You know, rather project a little bit higher and not need it than to project low, and then now we're short.
Yeah, more program.
Yeah, right.
And in principles, there's some disparity between principals that have just assumed that position versus principals that have been there for some time.
Yeah.
Not anymore, those
Yeah.
gaps have closed with the,
You require
the
salary.
required salary, because there were level ups on the principals as well, not just the teachers, to make sure that they met the minimum salary as well. And so that, those gaps have started to close significantly, and with ELTP, going in, it's really closing that gap.
But I can answer that question, Mr. Guadiana, as to why that is. So if you have a principal who's been here, say, for 10 years, and every year, so they may have started at 72,000, and I can tell you that that's where we all started. Ms. Davis, myself, and Mr. Corey, we all started at the same time. We all started at 72,000. But what has happened is, over the years, the state says, okay, you need to give a mandatory 4% raise, a mandatory 1% raise. So all those raises after 10, 11, 12 years, those add up. So there is going to be a disparity between a principal who is in our district with experience and one who just comes in, because they're going to start at that starting salary. And this other person has been here for a few years obtaining those mandatory raises.
And would that be specific to the experience as a principal, or would other
Administrative experience.
administrative experience? Okay. Okay.
The last sheet that you have here, is for the base for the teacher level ups. This is your salary schedule. This is the only one required to go in with the budget packet. We will be coming to you later on, because we have been kind of, working, Ms. Davis has been working on getting salary schedules for the different areas, as we've been like lacking in salary schedules. So this one is for the traditional base salary. There will be an ELTP one, because there's, if they're participating in the ELTP, there's a requirement for that, for a minimum salary for that as well. The $15, in the classified at the bottom level would be another salary schedule, like say for your custodian, your clerical staff and so forth, and then your ancillary positions. So that is in progress. It's not required for the budget. The only one that's required for the budget is the traditional teacher salary schedule that goes along with the budget. But so I included it. If I'm just gonna put it out there, it's part of the budget submission. So it can be approved. We made sure that we asked, because we didn't specify it on the agenda as a separate approval line item. It is, like I said, it is part of the budget packet that goes into the PED. If we can submit it without pending board approval, if you so choose not to include this as part of your motion to approve the budget. So, that's up to you. That's up to the board. If you so choose to include it as part of your approval, then it'll only be this traditional salary schedule, not any salary schedules that we are working with, that we're currently working on.
But these salaries are based already by the state.
It's based on what the state has mandated, yes. it's over just, it's there, you know, the table.
So, would you reference also salaries that are not on the schedule? And is there going to be a schedule for those?
Yes, there'll be separate schedules, but they're not required as part of the budget packet. So that's why they're not in this here, and we will bring those to you separately before we issue contracts. So it would be something that we could do, on the next board meeting before we issue contract.
And we could take a look at that and make changes to that?
Yes, right? Would it be some, it depends on what's mandated and what isn't mandated. So if the minimums are mandated and we have it in there, then there's the discretionary piece that says, you know, but reminding ourselves that we are within a budget. And so
Or if they change it, it's gonna.
if it changes and
You
it
are
starts boosting up people before, you know, then we won't fit in the budget. We won't fit it in the budget. Okay, so that's just something that we have to be, aware of before, you know, if we're gonna make changes to the salary schedule, that it actually goes with what their 3% and their 4% average went to with the level ups, or the $15 and the actual, you know, level ups for teachers and related services.
That's one concern that, how much exactly, well, I should say, how much content did the finance committee review related to salaries?
Specific personnel salaries? For
On
specific
this documentation that we're getting out, like for instance, this is pretty standard, but this one.
They didn't get this one, and we did notify them that it wasn't ready yet. And Terry had told them that we would be emailing it to them, so they will be getting it, but we did not review these two documents.
So that's, what, $10 million? What was it? $15 million? No, $10 million.
It's $10 million. And so we did discuss, of course, the red one, which is the salaries. We did, discuss the fix, but we did discuss, the different, you know, I mean, that the salaries consist of and in the area, but we didn't have this for presentation now.
That bothers me. That bothers me a lot. And I know last year I made the attempt to do that, and that was circumvented. And to go through another year of the board not participating, either through the finance committee or otherwise, on the majority of the money that's being spent is problematic. So I do appreciate the data that we're getting now, though I still am requesting the individual salaries spreadsheets that have been provided before and required as far as availability for public review. But the significant portions of these would be, that are not here, are the coaches, the administration.
What coach?
These are, remember I said this is a teacher salary.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is the salary
Oh.
schedule is not, doesn't include coaches, doesn't include.
Well, coaches, the instructional coaches, is that what you're referring to?
No, football coach,
Oh,
baseball coach.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those are on additional compensation, they're not base salary.
Okay. But still things that we should know, things that we should know, and things that we should have a say in.
Only on the stipend.
Yeah.
Additional compensation.
So, well, the bulk of the money actually is attributed to this, and still, there's still some flexibility in there. But still, my concern is, the board's responsibility for fiduciary responsibility oversight of such a significant portion such as is not being exercised. So, and it's deja vu, the consistency factor, yes.
Mr. President, I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments in reference to the presentation today. So I would recommend that the board approve the budget for school year 22-23 as presented by the board.
You heard the recommendation with your motion. So moved. Motion by Mr. Cordova, second. Second. Second by Mr. Molina. Any other questions?
I have a comment. In the budget review process, there's a whole year of activity that should go on, including reports of certain funds, and monthly updates on current expenditures and where we are in terms of the budget. We're also responsible for quarterly reports, which are very critical in terms of taking a look at conformity with the budget. We've had expenditures that increased via bar or expenditures that were made before the funding was available, and well, actually in excess of the funding that had been approved. We've had consistent findings in our previous audits for expenditures in excess of approved budget. And we put no safeguards to see if that's the case for this year. Those are my concerns about the ongoing budget oversights that the board has not done, and it's not to blame staff. That is something that is representative of our roles and responsibilities.
We do have the quarterly expenditure report that will be reviewed at the next board meeting on the 25th.
So this will be for the third quarter?
Second quarter, because the third quarter is due at the end of April. So there's always a month lag between like the quarter and the quarter gets submitted the month after.
So this is April.
So
The second quarter ended in December.
late in December. Second quarter is late.
We are late. We're not late submitting it. We've already submitted it, obviously, but
But not to the board.
Right.
And that's what's problematic. And I don't know of any quarterly report that I've seen in my tenure as a board member. So this one being forthcoming after it's already been submitted is better than what we've received so far, but certainly not within the criteria that the board is supposed to require.
Okay, any other questions? Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries. Let the minutes show that one opposed, three in favor. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, signatures.
Signature.
Yes, because it has to go in with the signature, so I'm gonna take.
Motion to adjourn. So moved. Everybody.